Hey, I wanted to make a quick video today, and this is the video that I wish I would have been able to have before I bought this optic. This is the Elcan SpecterTR 139. It is a funky little optic, but I love it. This is actually my second TR. My other one is mounted on a rifle. I probably have a few thousand rounds through it, so at this point I feel like I have a pretty good sense of its strengths, its weaknesses, and kind of where it falls in a world that has been taken over by LPVOs. So I am not a spec sheet guy. Spec sheets have their place, but today we're just going to talk about real use and kind of my takeaways from using this optic for a while now. You know, bottom line up front, I really like this thing. It's solid. It's built like a tank. Yes, there's a little bit of a weight penalty for that, but it's really solid, and it's very unique in terms of how it operates and what you get out of it. Like all optics, the key is, what's your use case? And do the pros and cons of this particular optic fit that? This is a little heavier than some other setups, but the weight is not as dramatic or painful as some folks would allow you to believe. As you can see, all of your adjustments to the optic in terms of windage and elevation happen on the mount itself, not inside of the scope tube. This leads to a pretty robust design. This, setup back here has a little locking mechanism, and you adjust this to change your elevation. Right here, you have your windage adjustment, which you can crank and rotate and make some adjustments there. The mount itself is very tank. Now, you will want to be careful that you do not over torque. Let me spin this around. I made a really dumb mistake when I first got this optic, and I over torqued this plate here, which is aluminum, and I split it a little bit. I since got a replacement part. It wasn't a big deal, but just be careful. Most of these, when you buy them new, are going to come with a little warning: do not over torque that plate trying to be He-Man. The mount is solid. You don't need to go crazy on it. They have the specs and all the paperwork for the scope in terms of how much torque you can put on there. Okay, let's talk quick body and controls before we get into it. So obviously you can see we have our scope body here. Now this particular model has been painted to more of an Elcan looking flat dark earth, that kind of Elcan brown, just because I prefer that, and it goes with the upper that I plan on putting this optic on. I have a similar paint job on my other TR. So on the operator side of the scope, you have this wheel here. Now this wheel rotates, and this is how you cycle through your magnification levels. At 1x, this thing functions basically like a super bright red dot. The brightness is aim point bright, rock solid, works great. Then you can transition up to 3x and then to 9x. It is not a smooth variation like you see on an LPVO. It literally jumps to those different magnifications, which makes the adjustments really, really quick, right? To 3, to 9, 3, 1. So super quick adjustments. I like this so much more than LPVOs in general. Having to reach up, especially if you have I think about my primary arms LPVO that has a bit of a tighter zoom ring. This is such a better control system for just jumping right from 1 to 3 to 9. I have never felt lacking by just having those fixed magnifications. I think it's rock solid. Okay, so let's keep going here. On the other side, where we started, we have our brightness dial here, right? So we can go up to 5 and then down to off. Works fine. Your battery cap houses a 2032, pretty standard stuff. Unscrews, you can drop it in. Battery life has been fine. I don't think that it's anything to write home about. If I checked the actual spec sheet, I'm sure we could confirm that. But it's perfectly fine. I haven't been flying through batteries or anything at a rate that alarmed me, at least this far. Now, this particular version of the TR comes with two Tenebrex scope caps. These are pretty great. They're solid. They flip down. You unclip them, and they can swing around and be clipped in this kind of locked position, so they hang there. So while you're shooting, they're not going to give you any problems. They've been good. Some guys pull them off. They're not bad to have. I don't mind them. The TR that I've actually been shooting has them and hasn't given me any problems. having played with them a lot, I'm really just not an LPVO guy. I don't like the feel of the eye box. It's just a personal preference thing. Some of them that I've had just seem kind of frail, and I don't totally trust them to hold up to long-term use. You know, if you're just someone who sits at a bench and doesn't shoot and move and doesn't train particularly hard, then I don't know. There's probably a lot of LPVOs that are going to work for you. For me, I like to actually be able to train and use my stuff a bit more aggressively, and I really like the feel of this particular optic. A lot of my time is spent at 1x. I think that's the other thing to consider here. You know, if you have a magnified optic, how far out are you, depending on where you live, how far out are you regularly shooting? Do you have a range that lets you get way out there, or are you shooting inside of 200 most of the time? For me, I spend most of my time at 1x, but I really like having magnification once I get back a little bit further. I'm not typically shooting further than 2 or 250 yards. So like I said, it's 80-20 for me. A lot of time at 1x, and then having that magnification when I'm back further is awesome. It's just a secondary consideration. So that brings me to some of the quirks of this particular optic. So you have that excellent aim point bright red dot at 1x that we discussed, which is great. When you go to 3x, you lose your dot. But luckily, you have an edged reticle. That edged reticle at 3x is great. It works perfectly fine. No issues there. Then you can jump up to 9, and that reticle is magnified. And now we'll put up some examples of this. Now you have your reticle at 9x. So here we get into some of the weirder elements of the way the scope works. There's a complex mechanism of glass and movement, things that are happening to make this all work, right? It does not function like your typical scope. So when you're at 9x, there are some things to be aware of. One, you got a narrower field of view than other alternatives out there. Is it the end of the world? No, especially if you're using it for target ID. It's not really, I mean, having a wider field of view is nice. It is not a deal breaker. The other issue at 9x is that you lose a little bit of sharpness and clarity of your reticle. Now, there is kind of a workaround to that. It comes with some modification, and that is simply to cut your front lens cap in a little window like so. This shrinks down basically the aperture of the light that's coming in, and it'll help sharpen up that reticle at 9x. Now, here's the problem. If you're at 9x and you're using this little scope cap cut hack, the trick is it's going to make your eye box less forgiving. And it's noticeable. But if you're already dialed in at 9x and you just want that extra clarity on the reticle, throwing this thing up does help with that. And I recommend having it at least as an option. You can always dump it down flat and then still make use of your optic the way it was originally designed. This just gives you some flexibility. Now, at 3x and 9x, the reticle is still technically illuminated. It illuminates the entire crosshair that you're seeing. And the brightness is really the issue. It is set up to be a more of a low light type of illuminated reticle, just to make sure you can differentiate it from dark surfaces. But out in broad daylight, a brighter background, it's not going to do you any good. You're going to want to be, if you want illumination during the day, you're going to want to go to 1x and get that great 1x dot. So to wrap things up, a few thousand rounds in, maybe a little bit more, with this optic, I would tell you that it is a great alternative to LPVOs if you understand some of the quirks of it. You're going to see some of the tube, some of the scope when you're looking down that thing. You're going to have a narrower field of view, especially at your max magnification. You are only going to get your red dot at 1x, which is it a compromise? Yes, but in practice, that hasn't really been an issue for me. You got the etched reticle for the other magnifications. And then finally, you're going to lose some of that reticle sharpness at 9x, and it's going to be slightly transparent, for lack of a better word. You can do the scope cap trick to help alleviate some of that, but still something to be aware of. Otherwise, I really like this thing. And personally, just as a guy who doesn't love LPVOs, I would choose this over an LPVO most of the time. Now, I'm sure as LPVOs get better and better every year, maybe that will start to fade. This thing is still built like a tank. I have a lot of respect for the Elcan Specter line in general, and I think this is definitely something you should consider, especially if you can find it on the secondhand market. They usually go between $1,100 and $1,500. And at that price point, it really is something you should at least be thinking about before you pick up a higher end LPVO. All right, thanks for watching today. I hope this helps somebody out there. I would have loved to have got some of this insight before I bought my TR. So think about it. Think about the details. See if it's right for you. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.